Open the podcast bay doors, Hal.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 155 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. We've got a long show in store this week, so let's get right into it. Special guest Dag and I started our discussion of episode 2 of Secret Invasion with some general thoughts before we dove into specifics, starting with Dag's impressions.
This was a step up from the last episode. I thought they doubled down on the noir. I really appreciated some of the extended cameos that we kind of wanted to see from the first episode, so that was nice.
Mm-hmm.
I thought there were some really great personal interactions between two of the characters. Overall, I was really pleased with this episode. I think it actually captured my attention more strongly on the first viewing than the first episode did.
Yeah, I thought this was a really good episode. I think everyone was just at the top of their game performance-wise. I was amazed by Samuel L. Jackson's performance, especially in this episode. You know, last episode he kind of was fairly one note, but here he had a full range of emotions and scenes, and it was just incredible to watch.
Absolutely. We want to jump in from the beginning?
Well, yeah. We start with kind of a previously on, except it's previously on Captain Marvel, where we get 1995 and the recap there, which includes the shot of the Skrulls flying off into space at the end of that episode. But in this very first actual scene of the show, we get a little bit of an answer of why the Skrulls are here instead of on another planet somewhere in the galaxy.
Yep. 1997, 2 years later.
Yeah.
Even better facial de-aging on Sammy than I think they did in the movie.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm sure they had a lot of the assets already there for doing it, and they just were able to spend more time refining it.
Yeah, he did an interview about that because of the whole debate on digital assets and face mapping and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of in a response to other actors now seemingly jumping on the train to have their likeness used, he was like, anywhere in the contract that it says in perpetuity, I cross out. Especially doing these Marvel films when they do all these digital things on my face and there's the dots on my face. I'm just like, oh no, they're not going to use my face forever. This one time only.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see that debate among the actors themselves. I don't think I have any skin in the game on that debate right now, as long as the people who are okay with it, that their likenesses aren't used maliciously.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, as long as it's consensual, you know, as long as they provide consent, then I think it should be up to each individual whether they want that sort of thing to happen for them or not. And yeah, good on Sam for taking the time to go through his contracts and say no.
Yeah. I don't think they did it on Ben Mendelsohn though, or maybe just a little bit.
I don't think they had to, because he's a Skrull.
Yeah.
So he can make his face look the same age or whatever age he wants to be.
I think that's a fair assessment. And we meet We get to see Soren again and young Gaia
And young Gravik.
and young Gravik, who is in emotional torment.
Oh, yeah. And is introduced to Fury by Vara.
Right. And she's sort of like a scroll caseworker. That was the vibe that I got from her.
Yeah, and I think we see her again at the end of the
Uh-huh.
show.
Surprising. Very surprising.
Yeah, we'll get there, but
How long see, and that's something that this episode calls into question is how long have these things been going on? Because
I have a lot of questions.
yeah,
Spy shows in general tend to raise more questions than they answer in the first part of their stories. So I really hope we're going to get most of these answers, if not all of them.
yeah,
But we'll find out. I also enjoy the little detail of the forehead contact as
yes,
the scroll
and
greeting,
affection. Yeah, I like
affection.
that too.
Yeah. It's nice to have, we saw Fury and Talos do that in the first episode, and it just kind of looked like a bro hug or something in there, but seeing it done repeatedly, it's like, oh, this is how Skrulls who are affectionate with one another greet each other.
It's definitely weird to think that, if you rewatch Iron Man and they get to that end credit sequence where Fury's like, you just stepped into a bigger world, Mr. Stark. You think you're the only one? And while there's more weight to that statement now, knowing that, for 12 years, he's been sort of the unofficial host of the Skrull coming and goings.
Yeah.
There sure is a heck of a lot of retcon. Like, we could have used Talos a long time ago.
Well, and I mean, imagine how much more complicated Winter Soldier would have been if there had been Skrulls
Oh, geez.
involved in Hydra.
We're not even there yet. That could be the thing. Like, there could have been Skrulls in Hydra. We don't know.
Yeah.
We're going to retcon all of the Marvel movies by being like, hey, remember that one sequence where there was that one couple doing that one thing? Yeah, they were Skrulls. Remember how we took that scientist from Iron Man 1 and brought him back in the Spider-Man movie? Yeah, that's going to happen some more.
So Talos tells us that they went looking for a home but found nothing but violence and hate.
Yeah.
And so sure, let's come back to Earth. That's going to work out well. No violence or hate here.
Yeah, it's a really good train conversation later.
Yeah. And the name of the episode is Promises. And we get the first of the promises here, where Fury says, if you take on a human face and work for me to keep my home safe, Carol Danvers and I will find you a new one. You keep your word, I'll keep mine.
Yeah.
And unfortunately,
it is the crux.
Yeah, that is the broken promise that seems to have caused this whole secret invasion to happen in the first place.
Pushed a very traumatized Gravik into an extremely disaffected position.
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling that we're going to see more of Gravik's feelings of betrayal in the past to really justify the steps that he's taking now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think we're going to get more flashbacks of young Gravik and also probably like post-blip Gravik or post-snap Gravik and see how he reacted to Fury being snapped away, coming back, and then immediately heading up to the space station and all of that.
Which unfortunately is he's just a victim of the narrative at that point.
Yeah.
He got snapped before they even filmed Captain Marvel, and then they ended Captain Marvel with him in space. And they weren't really going anywhere with that. Maybe we'll see some saber action later, but
well, I know we're getting some in the Marvels.
That'd be nice.
Have you watched the trailer for that yet?
I have. I remember that seeing that aspect. But since it comes out post Secret Invasion, it'll be interesting to see where in the timeline that movie's going to fit.
That's true. That's true. I do wonder about that. I was looking at the Marvel.fandom page and I was looking at the timeline, and they don't have Secret Invasion on there yet. But the latest projects beyond that are in 2026 now rather than 2025. Does that mean Secret Invasion takes place before Quantumania?
Hmm.
Or does this actually take place in November 2026 and we've just been assuming 2025 this whole time?
It would be an interesting time rush on that part. We know that the Marvels obviously have to take place after Ms. Marvel.
Yes. And Miss Marvel takes place in 2025 still.
Given that the end of Ms. Marvel was the beginning of the quantum entanglement between Kamala and Carol,
Mm-hmm.
I imagine the Marvels is going to pick up right at that moment,
Yeah, I would think so.
given the whole primary plot of that is that the three of them are somehow entangled.
So Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and Quantum Mania are both in 2026.
Interesting.
But Guardians has always kind of been ahead of the curve when it comes to the timeline, if I remember right.
Well, Guardians and Guardians 2 both took place in 2014. Just Guardians 2 was like 6 months later. And then the end credit scene for Guardians 2 took place pre Infinity War because Groot's a teen.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next time we see them is Infinity War.
That's true. Yeah, they have the timeline as Guardians of the Galaxy, and then have you watched the Groot shorts?
I have.
Oh, I love those so much.
They're so adorable.
Yeah, so they have Guardians of the Galaxy, then I Am Groot, the First Steps episode, and then Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and then the rest of those shorts after that. And that all takes place in 2014.
Those shorts are so adorable.
Yeah, agreed. If any of you have not watched that are listening right now, I highly recommend you take half an hour to sit down and watch all those, because they're real quick 5-minute shorts and there's 5 of them, so it does not take long and it is highly worth it. But getting back to the show that we're here to discuss, we cut to present day and Moscow right after Maria was shot. And Gravik and Gaia just calmly walk out of the scene. As we said last episode, if you see someone calmly walking away, you know they're part of the plan. Meanwhile, Fury and one of the Skrull decoys are both arrested or taken. It appears at first, but we find out that Nick's arrestor is actually Talos.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't it Brogan that got arrested?
Yes. Now, last episode, we referred to one of the Skrulls as Brogan. We were mistaken. That is Pagan. Pagon. Brogan was the one who that we saw take on the form and take on the mind in the first episode, whereas Pagan or Pagon or however it's pronounced is the one who was Gravik's kind of right-hand man this entire time.
Here's an interesting thing I just noticed on the MCU wiki. These episodes of Secret Invasion take place November 3rd, 4th, and 5th so far. So it's November 5th, 2026 in the last episode. And the Marvels comes out November 10th of this year. So I feel like they're lining it up.
Yeah, but it's funny that we're still going to be 2 years ahead of the actual calendar year that we're in.
I'm okay with that.
I mean, I'm okay with it. I just wonder if they're going to catch up at any point or if it's going to constantly be a little bit ahead.
I know we don't have time to get into it, but we have always jumped around. You know, Iron Man 3 came out in May 2013, but it takes place in Christmas 2012 after,
Right.
you got to give it a little bit of wibbly wobbly slack.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with things being released a little bit out of order and them using the 5 year time gap between Infinity War and Endgame to jump ahead and give themselves that kind of time to play with in their calendar. But it's interesting where they choose to put different projects and how they choose to arrange the calendar such as it is.
It's still cool that they look like they're lining them up to have the Marvels happen right after these events.
Yeah. So, Brogan is just constantly yelling, I'm an American! I'm an American! And at first, when I'm watching it, my first thought was, you probably don't want to yell that out in the middle of Moscow.
Right after a terrorist attack.
But then I realize their whole goal is to start a war between America and Russia. So that's probably exactly what he was told to do, is to say, hey, by the way, I'm an American. And, you know, it sounds like that kind of treat me like I'm a citizen with all of these rights when he's saying it. But of course, in Russia, they don't care about your rights as an American citizen if you're
No, it's just gonna give them weight to push demands.
yeah.
2,000 dead plus whatever gets pulled out of the rubble. It's significant and it is scary. And I think they did a really good job of like throwing that weight at the viewer to be like, yes, this happened and people died, and you can bet your ass if this happened today, Russia would be all over this like white on rice.
Oh, hell yeah. There's no chance that this would not end up in some sort of conflict. And we can only hope that that's avoided in this show.
Yeah.
But now we get onto the train where Talos has taken on the disguise of an attractive Russian woman.
And more of a chance of meeting aliens.
Yeah, that's a fun little scene there. As soon as she said that, I was like, oh, that's Talos.
Yeah, of course.
And we get the game of Tell Me Something I Don't Know. This was one of those scenes where I was just enraptured by Samuel L. Jackson's performance. Him talking about being on the train as a kid with his mom going from Alabama to Detroit.
With the fried chicken.
The fried chicken and the game, and him and Susie behind Old Man Jackson's barn. I wonder if they specifically chose Jackson because of who
Samuel L. Jackson. Yeah. And how he had said that like it didn't matter that she knew I was lying. She knew exactly what the relationship between me and Susie was, and I didn't have to say a word.
Yep.
And that totally just lends itself to backing Nick Fury as a character and being able to say, like, even in lies, you can discern fundamental truths about things and people.
Yeah. And last episode, he has that line to Sonya of, I can't always tell if someone is a human or a Skrull, but I can tell when a human is lying. That's one of his skills that he has learned over the years, is how to tell if someone is lying and what that lie tells him about them. And now we learn the big lie, at least the lie of omission, that Talos has not told Nick up until this point.
Yep.
So we knew that there were Gravik's compound has like 500 Skrulls in it, but there are 1 million Skrulls out there, which I think kind of shows how extreme Gravik is. Because if there's 1 million Skrulls and he has 500 of them under his rule, under his leadership,
yeah,
that shows how small a proportion of the Skrulls want to go that far.
Well, and who knows? There might be other cells that we don't know about
That's
elsewhere. I
true.
mean, we learn in this episode that several high profile figures are actually part of this council, and the council agrees to it, but that's later.
Yeah, but that council, that council used to have Talos on it, and we know that that was the mainstream scroll leadership, at least at one
Right.
point.
And now they're masquerading as world leaders and political commentators,
Yes.
agitators.
Including, might as well point this out while we're talking about it. Did you recognize Christopher McDonald?
I did. It's always fun to see someone from a distant episode of Star Trek in a new thing.
Yes.
Chris McDonald was in the Next Generation third season episode Yesterday's Enterprise as an officer on board the Enterprise C, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, one of the best episodes of Next Gen, I would say. And so it was fun to see him again in that role as the FXN commentator.
FX, like Disney, you're going to war. But just the
portion of the company we didn't buy.
Yeah, that anagram with today's events around what's happening with Disney in Florida. It's a nice little tiny little flip finger at the a segment of news watchers. Just
yes,
be nice about it.
Yeah. All right, but we've skipped ahead a little bit, and I want to go back to the
train scene.
Yeah, because, well, first of all, there's a comic book reference in here that I thought was interesting. Because when Talos tells him that there's 1 million scrolls here on Earth, he says every scroll that isn't in Emperor Droge's colony, they answered. And now there is a scroll named Droge in the comics, but he was not emperor. He was the head priest of the sciences, and it was his experiments that allowed the scrolls to give other scrolls actual superpowers. And that's what allowed them to do the secret invasion in the comics and pretend to be various heroes and villains.
And Droge, in that comic timeline, does something very relevant to the episode that we see here. Certainly not being attributed to Droge,
no,
but they are grabbing strings from that.
Yes.
We're so leaning into it, and I'm so excited.
I am too. I didn't think they were going to go there. I assumed that they were not going to do any super scrolls in this show, but it sure looks like they're heading in that direction.
I am not spoiled at all because, well, okay, technically vice versa. I'm completely spoiled because I distinctly remember a preview showing Gravik launching his arms out with super stretchy long abilities.
I saw that too, but I just took that as part of the scroll's shape-shifting ability.
I went immediately to Fantastic Four.
Yeah, I can totally understand that because there is the Super Scroll, whose theme song I will cut in just a little piece of here.
'Cause his left arm can stretch like it's made out of plastic. It's as elastic as Mr. Fantastic. His right arm's got orange rocks for skin. From the shoulder down, he's as strong as Big Ben Grin. He can turn one leg invisible, which really isn't all that practical. Unless you're extremely gullible, you won't get fooled by Super Skrull.
Love it.
This is a song by a folk band called Ookla the Mock that is the theme from Super Skrull.
Wow, okay.
But yeah, the first Super Skrull in the comics had each of the abilities of the Fantastic Four, including Reed's stretching ability, the Thing's invulnerable skin.
Fortitude.
the
Sue's
ability
invisibility
to create
and
fire and yeah, Susan's invisibility and force field creation. But all of his powers were artificial, whereas the ones in Secret Invasion are actual genetic modifications of Skrulls to give them superpowers.
and we'll see what kind based on a tiny little screen pivot of certain callbacks.
Yes, but we'll get there in a little while longer.
I love on the train when Samuel L. Jackson exclaims, like, humans can't even get along with each other. What made you think that you could have a million aliens trying to live in peace here? It's not going to happen.
Yeah, Talos is an idealist, and Fury is a realist, and says, "Look, humans are so busy fighting each other right now. You introduce an outside species, there's just going to be more fighting, and you're going to be part of it."
Not enough room on this planet for two species. Hell, there's not enough room in this train pod.
Yeah. And Talos is kicked out somewhere between Moscow and Warsaw.
A lot of places to go. There's so many pieces falling into place for a conclusion that I'll share when we pass some of the final pieces about the Skrull history.
Okay.
Suspicions that I have.
All right. Yeah, I think this still could, at this point, very much go in the direction that I alluded to last episode, with Talos and Fury ending up more antagonistic.
I think that's fair.
But in the meantime, we follow Nick back to London, where Maria's body is being returned from Moscow.
Yeah.
And we meet Maria's mom,
Yeah.
played by Juliet Stevenson. She does a great job here of playing the grieving mother.
Especially when she just calls Nick out for being patronizing, and how everyone's like, well, we owe you a debt of gratitude. But apparently that debt doesn't extend to knowing where my daughter was murdered and why.
Yeah. But Nick is able to tell her the truth about what happened to her.
Yeah, no, the interaction there is the one that I was referencing in the beginning of this show, when I was like, man, there were some good interactions. But the fact that Fury was just on the level with Maria's mom betrayed another note of sentimentality that we've seen a couple instances of since this show. First, the embrace of Talos. Next, we see it again in the similar gesture with Gravik at the beginning. This is not the Nick Fury that we're used to, who holds everything close to his chest, fakes his own death, and then shows up at the end with the helicarrier.
Yeah, this is a much more personal Nick Fury than we've seen in the past at all.
I'm totally digging it.
Yeah. Again, Samuel L. Jackson's performance in here, just off the charts. Amazing.
Yeah.
And even though she blames Fury for Maria's death, Mom still says, don't let her death be for nothing. Go out there, finish whatever it was that you were doing. So even more than it was already, this is now personal for Nick.
Yep.
But while it's personal for Nick, we get to see the rest of the world react to what's going on with all of the news reports.
Yep. Sergio Caspiani?
Yes, the
Caspani,
NATO
the NATO
Secretary General. We see the UK Prime Minister. We see a few newscasters, including the one played by Christopher McDonald. And I love how they pepper them in there, and you don't even think about it as them being characters necessarily. They're just people that would have something to say about this news. And then we cut to the council meeting, and there they all are.
Yeah, just immediately like, wait a second. Man, I wonder how many people in the writers' room were like, should we get J.J. Jameson on this? Maybe? No.
No.
Okay.
No.
Sorry, he stole our color scheme. We can't have him.
The only thing that kind of frustrated me in that news montage was that the FXN guy was actually right, and it is a false flag.
But misinformation has hints of the truth.
But the problem is that there are so many people out there who have accused so many things of being a false flag. The fact that they're actually correct in this case, I don't want to say it lends credence to those who claim that sort of thing elsewhere, but I don't know, it lends some semblance thereof. I would prefer that the message be the people who are calling false flag are usually wrong. Because they usually are.
Yes, which helps us group this rare true statement into that bucket and say, no, he's just an agitator. Don't listen to him. We screwed up and we have to atone for it, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would have been interesting to see what other kind of bylines or script styles they may have gone with before they settled on this one.
Now, before we actually get to the council, Gaia and Gravik are driving there, and Gravik says, while he didn't know Fury was going to be there for sure, he kind of hoped he was, and he wanted to see what was left of him. And he says, just vapors. Do you still strongly disagree with that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm over here going, they're going to pull... Maria Hill's coming back. I'm just like,
oh wow.
Sorry.
Oh, I doubt that seriously.
Okay. No, I'm glad to be on opposing sides, but I'm just totally throwing it out there that if everybody keeps pointing out how fragile and timid and unprepared Nick Fury is, I'm still following up with the badass line from Winter Soldier. It was like, if you're going to try to get 2 steps ahead of me, you got to keep one eye open. You don't just operate on the most expensive space vehicle Earth's ever invested in and then come back down with a big old gray beard and be like, well, I guess I'm going to retire to Alabama with some fried chicken. No, that's not going to happen. It's not. Nick Fury is still on top of the game, and he is playing this super close to the chest. We already know that we've seen Maria Hill scroll in Far From Home.
True, but that was Soren, who is also dead.
Or is she? I mean, I think it lends emotional weight to keep her dead, yes, and off screen and unfortunate, but I just don't think that we've seen the end of Maria Hill. And the fact that Smulders even said she was surprised that nobody on set for that filming of that scene leaked it. And I'm like, it makes sense. But if it was just Maria was dead and that's it, it would be more likely to be leaked than just, oh, Maria's not actually dead and we're not going to talk because there's still 4 more episodes.
Yeah,
That's where my brain is. I have hope.
There's also, if you are caught leaking from Marvel, you are basically blacklisted.
Yeah,
so
Disney's Pinkertons come looking for you.
There really haven't been many leaks in the MCU outside of Tom Holland.
Yeah. the supercut of Tom doing talks and Benedict's there, and Benedict's just like, allow
Stop.
me,
No,
let me,
no.
I've got this. Nope, don't say anything. I guess I'm firmly in the camp that refuses to believe everything they're saying about Nick, which is a meta commentary on what's actually happening in the show, where people are not trusting what's being said about people.
Well, we'll see at the end
we will.
here. So we should probably get to the council meeting.
Let us.
Because at first, it seems like the council wants to punish Gravik for his actions. Especially, I would say, Shirley and the UN Secretary General there are the strongest proponents for that.
I would say so. Yeah.
And this is when Gravik goes into his speech about Fury's broken promise. And I love that he gives the speech in Skrullish. That he's like, I'm not going to use the humans' language to get my points across.
Yeah.
I'm talking to you scroll to scroll. This is our war, our reasons for fighting it, and I'm not going to borrow from our human subjugators as he sees them.
Yeah.
Now, one of the council members there asks, what happens if the Avengers return? Where are the Avengers at this point? Let's kind of go through. So, who would you consider to be Avengers who are active and alive at this point?
Active, alive, and available. You've got Banner and Hawkeye.
Yeah.
And we know from some deleted scenes that Banner kind of had some kind of celebrity hero phase during the blip.
Yeah, during the blip he did, but we also know from She-Hulk that he's spending a lot of time on his little island retreat, or, this could take place when he's elsewhere with his new son.
Mm-hmm. I think we can determine that Thor is off-world.
Yeah, Thor is busy being
a dad.
Yeah.
The original Avengers, the most available ones would be Banner and Hawkeye. Hawkeye may not be super active. Banner is seemingly doing his own thing.
Yeah.
Captain Marvel's out there somewhere. Nobody knows Peter Parker anymore.
True.
Of like the only christened Avengers, Spider-Man would be the only one who was active.
Scarlet Witch and Vision are unavailable.
Yeah, they're toast. At least according to the end of Multiverse of Madness,
Right.
the Scarlet Witch is no longer present, and there's a White Vision out there somewhere.
And then Falcon / Captain America.
Yeah,
He's
perhaps
active.
Still with Bucky.
Yeah. I mean, I know we're getting a new movie with him next year, but I guess they left it off. He's still kind of doing his own thing. He's not officially with the military anymore.
Yeah, we know Rhodey is a special advisor now.
Yeah. But he still uses the suit, apparently.
Yeah, I suppose if I had a government agent with a super suit, I would want him as close to me as possible. Ritson, the new president, obviously has a preference for Rhodes, and Rhodes is cavalier enough to mention frequently that, my suit's titanium. It's made of metal. Why don't you come out of hiding? We can do this.
Yeah.
The last
I'll put
time
on
we
the suit
saw
and carpet bomber.
Yeah. And just in the middle of a freaking, inquiry, he just says that, like, whoa, Rhodey. Like, I know that wasn't you.
He covered the mic.
Yeah.
He covered the mic.
It is an inappropriate thing to say for someone that we might hold in a higher esteem. But last time we saw Rhodes was Falcon and Winter Soldier, and he hasn't been very active in things since Infinity War.
Mm-hmm.
So, say for the last 3 years, he has been steadily maybe climbing more into the bureaucratic side of world affairs.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So yeah, the Avengers really aren't available for the most part.
Nope.
But apparently Gravik has some sort of plan for if they return. He says, "Do you think I didn't think of that?" So I would assume that means he has a contingency plan available. Perhaps one that we'll talk about a little bit more as we get into the rest of the episode.
Maybe, yeah.
So it's here where the UK Prime Minister decides to nominate Gravik as the Skrull General.
Surprising everyone.
Yeah, no one on the council thought that there was a conspirator in their midst.
And it turns out there were 3.
I don't know. I think.
Well, we know.
I think
we know the UK Prime Minister.
Yeah, I think she definitely was. I think the other 2 are going along. They seemed to have problems with Gravik when he first showed up.
I got the impression that the FXN guy was in on it, and he was just roasting Gravik.
That's potentially possible. I would not be horribly surprised if that was revealed. but I think most of the people there were not on Gravik's side originally, were not conspirators, and just are going with who they think has the most power at this point.
Fair. Until you get chopped in the throat. And then you cow real quick.
Yeah, which, I mean, obviously the bodyguard is also a Skrull, so I guess they have similar strength to one another, so that doesn't really answer questions about when they're in their stealth mode and completely being human as much as possible, do they still have super strength or anything like that? We still don't know that for sure.
Total speculation, but it might behoove, evolutionarily speaking, them to have shapeshifty reaction times. Even from like weird events, like you suddenly recognize you're falling, but you're only falling like a meter or two. Your body instantly reinforces itself to minimize damage.
Or makes itself as soft as possible to absorb the blow.
I'm going to be putty today. Help, I've fallen and I can't get up. Yeah, no, this whole sequence like flipped the script. And I know they did it real quick. Like we're an episode and a half in, and boom, Gravik is the man now.
Yes.
Ordained by the Council of the Skrulls on Earth. There might be a million of you, but these 5 people just sealed your fate.
Yeah, 5, because there were 5 there. Gravik shows up, and one person, Shirley, as she gets called, we don't know what her title is exactly, if she holds some sort of position in government like many of the others did. We don't know. But I love her bit here where she says, hey, look, we're not homeless refugees because we were unwilling to wage war. We ended up homeless refugees because we were too willing, which says to me that there is more history of the Kree-Skrull conflict than we know. And that maybe it was actually instigated by the Skrulls in the first place.
This is the medium rare chops of the episode for me. I loved it, and it made me think that maybe the Skrulls instigated the war with the Kree, and that maybe Talos was a pretty savage leader in that world, and he learned a lesson or two, and realized that he screwed up, and he wants to atone for that, and that's why he is, I don't want to say pacifist is the right word, because he'll still fight the right person, but he's so against killing, and he's so against the kind of direct action that Nick Fury would take more liberally.
Yeah. And it could be that the events of this show pull him back into that role, which is where the antagonism will come in.
If he loses Gaia, you bet.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if it's a human that kills her.
Yeah.
Even more so if it's Nick, because Gaia is going to do something and Nick has to pull the trigger or let people die.
And Gaia is still playing both sides, it seems.
I definitely feel like she's being swayed for sure.
Yeah, at the very least, she is worried about what Gravik is up to. She is not all in. She is not a devoted follower of Gravik's necessarily, even though she's right there with him basically the whole time.
Yeah. So Gravik asks Shirley to leave, says she won't be harmed, and she leaves.
And he actually follows through on that. So he does have some sort of code or honor or something. He won't kill people who don't submit. He's willing to let people go their own way as long as they're not actively, I mean, at this point, she doesn't seem to be actively fighting against him. She says, I'm not going to submit. I don't support your coup. I don't support your war. But she's not saying, and I'm going to go create a resistance to fight against you.
Well, that's true. It wouldn't be much of a newly ordained general if your first act was to lie to a member of the council and then murder them in front of the other members of said council who just gave you the title. I don't think that would work too well, at least directly. Surreptitiously, Shirley might be toast and we don't even know.
That's true. We may find out she died later. But for now, it looks like he's doing the honorable-ish thing with regards to her. But Shirley goes out and she immediately calls Talos. And it's like, hey, you should know what's happening. And Talos says, okay, set up a meeting between me and Gravik. Which, I mean, we've seen the scene in the trailer with all of the Graviks with Talos, so I'm assuming that's where the meeting is going. That's how the meeting is going to end. It's going to be a public place with lots of civilians around who then all reveal themselves to be Skrulls. But that's probably for next episode. In the meantime, we go back to New Skrullos, where apparently word has spread fast.
Yeah. There's a big O celebration in there. But, Gaia's keeping an eye on him, and it's a very suspicious eye.
Well, she specifically follows Pagan, or however you pronounce that, who ends up in the room with Dr. Rosa Dalton, talking about the harvest, which has something to do with DNA. So this is our first hint that they're working on making some good old-fashioned Super Skrulls.
Yeah, and we see that 4 samples of DNA are Groot, the frost beast that was left behind at the end of Thor: The Dark World.
Yeah.
Cull Obsidian's hand, which had been severed by Wong in Infinity War. And
the closing of the portal.
Yeah, some random extremis person. No name on that one.
No. I assume they're just referring to the chemical itself rather than a specific individual.
But now we have all of our elements for some interesting speculation. For instance, we already said that we saw the preview where Gravik was stretching his arms out. We know Groot can do that.
That's true.
And we know the Frost Beast has, potential freezing abilities, and Extremis has potential fire abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have 2 elements incorporated into this. Fire, obviously, for maybe the Human Torch reference.
Yeah.
And then Cull Obsidian is your fortitude.
Yeah, exactly.
So we swapped invisibility for Iceman.
Which, since we don't have a creature yet who has shown that power in the MCU that I can think of.
I mean, the only one I can think of is adjacent to the MCU with Miles Morales.
Yeah. I had that thought as well, but he is not
just
part
outside
of the actual MCU yet.
Yeah.
I noticed that each of the samples were acquired on Earth. They specifically have that in the computer screen there.
I like the categorization here, the cataloging. Terra C53 as the location of the samples acquired.
Mm-hmm.
C53 is a Kree. Well, was a Kree designation, but maybe this is just like interstellar designation for Earth.
Right. So I guess from here, we should probably go to Rhodey and Fury's meeting at Burner's Tavern.
Yet another really good dialogue between 2 heavy hitters in the MCU.
Yeah. 2 actors at the top of their game playing off of each other really well. And after Fury tries to explain the Skrull threat, he can tell from Rhodey's reaction that Rhodey already knew. Rhodey says he was briefed on them 15 years ago, which places that briefing around the same time as Iron Man 2. This is a lot of retconning on what Rhodey knew and when.
Yes, which, obviously begs the question of so many questions. Is Rhodey a Skrull here? Has he been a Skrull the whole time? Is he legit and he has been briefed on it and he's been aware of Skrulls the whole time? It would definitely call into question. It's not like I rewatched the MCU overnight. I don't think there's anything Rhodey says that kind of betrays that.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, but it's just a glorious scene.
Yeah. And man, when Rhodey basically calls Fury a mediocre man, That was painful to watch.
They keep pushing the agenda. Just keep saying it over and over, and if you tell a lie long enough, everyone will believe it. Nope.
Well,
I'm
but
gonna stand
Fury shows that he's still kind of a badass when he takes the bodyguard down.
which is immediately rescinded when he falls to the bench and is like,
Yeah, well, I think physically he's still got a lot of his prowess, but emotionally he's fairly broken still.
yeah.
That crisis of faith that he talked about last episode is still with him, and being basically betrayed by someone who apparently he has more of a history with than we have been made aware of.
Well,
He says basically, who put you in your position where you are right now? And Rhodey says, whoa, what, you think I owe you for that? So Rhodey and Fury, they really haven't had much interaction in the MCU that we've seen, but I would say that they have a lot more history than we knew up to this point.
there's absolutely room to fill in a relationship for them post Age of Ultron. If we assume that they met in Age of Ultron,
I would say the way Fury says, who got you into your position, I would think even before that. I would think it would go back maybe even pre-Iron Man.
it would be interesting if Nick Fury had a say in how Rhodey's military career took off, because we know Fury was military when Alexander Pierce, in the 70s even.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely room for that. I'm not sure if it feels like it makes the universe smaller, if that's what happens there. Having too many connections in the past that overlap is like, okay, well, now the universe is just about the Skywalkers and their family troubles.
Right, yeah.
But it would be interesting if post Age of Ultron, they were able to capitalize on their political stuff and get Rhodey in a situation where, the blip happens and Rhodey's still around. And for 5 years, he's got to do stuff. Fury's not around anymore. And then Fury comes back and the world's changed and they send him up to his spaceship. And Rhodey is still bureaucratic. I mean, we haven't seen Rhodey suit up since Endgame. So it's been, given the date of things, it's been 3 years.
Right.
And there's still more socio-political context for them to have interacted in those 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Now, as a cis straight white guy, I don't want to try to comment too much on the conversation about these two black men and the things Fury says about wresting power so that people like us have a seat at the table. I don't feel like there's too much I should say, but at the same time, I want to bring up the conversation and say that I really felt the importance of what they were saying in that moment.
Yeah, it definitely resonated with me. And I appreciate, your sensitivity to that being sort of a conversation that really exists between them, and acknowledging that there's an understanding that we probably don't have, that viewers who felt represented in that moment have a much stronger engagement with in their reality on this world. But I really also appreciated that they seemed to be looking at it from like same source, but sort of different conclusions when Rhodey counters like, you want me to help you out, but we didn't wrest this power just to give it to people who would do bad things with it.
Yeah, and that's where he calls him basically a mediocre man and fires him. Right.
And I just the the expression of appreciation Rhodey has for the eloquence with which he verbally whips Nick Fury's ass in that moment is unparalleled. Go back to the Merovingian in the Matrix.
Oh,
Love swearing in French. It's like kicking your ass with silk.
But again, just so painful to watch from Fury's perspective.
Oh yeah,
seeing him. Yeah.
Well, and this is the hero's moment where now he's alone. He's kicked Talos off his team. His team fired him.
Yeah, he is truly alone at this point.
Right.
Although not completely, as we'll find out near the very end of the episode.
This is true. Nick Fury's allegiances are definitely more murky than we have ever anticipated.
Yeah. But again, before we reach that conclusion, we get more of Sonya.
Oh, yes. What a delicious scene that was.
Oh.
And I'm not talking about the meat locker.
Again, she comes in and she has that light touch. She just has that edge of humor to her that is perfect for the scenes that she's in. The way she kicks everyone out and says, "Oh, I'm taking over. This is mine. Good try doing your torture." Beating your meat, as she puts it.
Oof. And then that dude who's trying to get his jacket off the meat hook, it just is like, "Arr!" And I really, really hope that was just like the actor improvising when the jacket wouldn't come off the hook, because it was hilarious.
Oh yeah,
and
it looks
totally
so
in
real.
character.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. And Sonya has something that I wonder if this only works on Skrulls or if this would be usable in humans as well, but she has some sort of injection that will make your blood boil, almost literally.
Yeah, I was like, did she inject him with extremis or like a bad version of it? She cut it with cocaine or something? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, your blood's literally boiling out of your body. Like, I probably would have confessed before the needle even touched me. I'd be like, no, I got you. It's cool. Let's go.
Hold on.
He's going to kill me, but I'm just going to shapeshift into somebody else. I'm going to walk away. You're never going to see me again. Here's everything you want to know. I'll write it down. I'll sign it, notarize it. We're done. Take that needle away from me.
Yeah, but this guy was not afraid of it at first.
No.
Now, again, I have questions about how much shapeshifting and what kind of things that Skrulls have the ability to do, because I have all of the comics history of various shapeshifters. And I remember Mystique at one point shapeshifted where her organs were and changed where in her body her organs were, so that when she was stabbed by Wolverine, it was in a non-vital location. And so I wonder if when he said, "Go ahead, put it in my arm," if he had some sort of ability to like block that off. But whereas, she puts it in the buttocks, which is maybe an area that couldn't be cut off as easily, and so was able to affect him. He has a little bit of a look when she gives him the jab that's like, oh damn.
That is an interesting assertion, and I'd love to see them make that a little more canon. My first reaction upon hearing the comic book power stuff is like, we all know that comic books are written with powers that are needed by the writers at the time that they're needed,
absolutely.
And they're completely discarded afterwards. But if someone was going to be able to do that, I'd say Mystique, because she has molecular control over her ability. I don't know how the Skrull stuff works, but it would be a nice feature for them to also be able to do that. Granted, you'd think that ability would be a little bit more reactive, even if you're getting stabbed in a place that you didn't expect to get stabbed.
Yeah, it's hard to say how much of that is a conscious thing versus what they can do just purely on instinct.
Especially since Fury shot that one guy in the last episode. If that was a thing that if that was the kind of attention you might attract to yourself as a shapeshifter, you might always have your vitals in a place that is non-vital.
That's true. Well, and this scene here, we find out for sure that if you cut off part of a Skrull, it reverts to its natural form.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we've established that, let's party, shall we?
Man, I feel bad following Sonya's plot, thinking she's with the good guys, and then she resorts to torture. And I don't want to be someone who celebrates that.
Yeah, I would agree.
I don't know. Maybe I'm conflicted because the villain didn't do the whole I'm just gonna die then kind of thing. Like at the end of Star Trek 2009, when they're like, we're going to offer you amnesty. And he's like, I would rather burn in 1,000 suns and watch Romulus die 1,000,000 times than surrender myself to you. And they're like, oh, okay. And then it's totally justified to blow this dude away who's clearly
Right.
traumatized.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, in real life, we know that torture does not actually generally provide
Reliable
actionable
information. Yeah.
reliable intelligence. So,
Yep.
but again, we're watching a show, so
For a 6
some of
episode
that-
show with limited scope, we just assume he
Yeah.
told the truth.
yeah. Well, and we know he did for the most part. He says the Daltons are the ones who are doing the science, and we see Gaia look up Dr. Rosa Dalton, and that's where she gets all the information from on those various beasts.
Hmm.
So we know he was telling the truth there, and he says, I think he's trying to make us stronger, which is our second clue towards Super Skrulls.
Now, did you find any information out about Rosa Dalton in the comic books?
I looked that up, and
I'm just scrolling through an article. It says that they don't have an origin in Marvel Comics,
I thought that was the case.
which is nice because it's nice to have some surprises that you're not going to pull everything from established canon.
Yeah, and Dr. Dalton here is played by an actress who was in one of my favorite TV shows of all time, because she played the sister in Wonder Falls.
Which is a show that I just learned existed right now.
Oh, really? Okay. Wonder Falls is one of the shows created by Brian Fuller in the early to mid 2000s. And it is about a girl who basically wants to just live her life and be ignored by the world, but for some reason figures of animals like stuffed bears or a wax lion or a statue of a monkey, they all start talking to her and telling her how to help people in the world.
There is a intense Marvel pedigree among its cast. William Sadler,
yeah.
who played the president, and Lee Pace.
Yep.
Ronan the Accuser started in Wonder Falls. I'm also really happy to see Tracy Toms among that list, who was in Rent.
Yes, she plays the best friend of our lead character.
Is it Kate Finneran who's playing the Doctor?
Yes, Katie Finneran.
And you said the name of this episode was?
This episode is called Promises.
And in 2010, Katie Finneran was in a off-Broadway musical called Promises. Promises. Uh-oh. That's a connection right there. She was a scroll in the play. Wait.
The whole time.
The scroll time. We're seeing scrolls everywhere.
Yeah. But Wonder Falls only lasted one season, unfortunately. So it's only 13 episodes or so, but if you get a chance to see it, I highly recommend it.
Let's see if I can find it.
Anyway, that's who Rosa Dalton is.
And we seem to cut from this torture scene to a computer scene.
Yes, which we've already pretty much discussed.
Is true. Too much excitement on that front.
But Gaia is good at covering her tracks when Gravik shows up and it's like, what you looking at? Oh, just checking our latest recruit.
Yep.
Everything's good. He looks nice and loyal. And Gravik's like, loyal, huh?
Yep.
So I wonder if Gravik already has some suspicions, or maybe even knows that Gaia is not fully on his side.
Well, if we're going to take for this specific 6-episode series that Gravik is the counterweight to Nick Fury, and Nick Fury can know when a human lies, follows that Gravik can know when a Skrull lies.
Makes sense.
They have a conversation about Talos as a coward.
Yes, and also as a former general, which points to your theory earlier of him possibly being in charge of the early Kree-Skrull War.
Or an instigator. And maybe he
Yeah.
sees too much of himself in Gravik, and Gravik doesn't have the wisdom to not be that.
That's true.
But he could start a whole different war with the humans and then push the humans into the Kree camp, and then the Kree and the humans could completely eliminate the Skrulls.
Yeah, I
Not
don't
thinking this through, G-boy.
We have the shifting alliances in this episode of all of the Western European countries now siding with Russia over the Americans. So yeah, that would be an interesting parallel there of the Skrulls mistakenly leading the humans into the arms of another species that is against the Skrulls.
Yeah. In the comics, the Skrulls are the bad guys.
In the comics, really, both of them are the bad guys.
Fair.
Except for some rare exceptions like Captain Marvel
Yeah.
and Hulkling.
Yeah, I got to admit, when I was watching Captain Marvel, I had an about face when I learned that the Skrulls were on our side and they were going to be the sympathetic victims in that movie.
Oh yeah,
That was really
that
weird
was
for me.
quite the twist for those of us who follow the comics, because yeah, the Skrulls are constantly an invading force. They started out as a Fantastic Four villain, which is why the Super Skrull has the Fantastic Four's powers.
Yes.
And I love the early 60s writing in what the Fantastic Four did with the first Skrulls that they encountered. Are you familiar with this?
I'm not. Educate me.
Okay. So in the very first appearance of the Skrulls, there were just a few of them trying to invade, and we learn their shape-shifting ability and all of that. And of course, the Fantastic Four defeat them, and they don't have a working spaceship at this point. They don't know about the Kree at this point. There's no intergalactic council or power that the Fantastic Four can go to and say, hey, we captured these guys trying to invade our world. So they can't do that, but they're heroes, so they're not going to kill the Skrulls. So they hypnotize the Skrulls and convince them that they are cows. And so the Skrulls shapeshift into cows and are basically left as mindless cows to wander a local field and just be cows for the rest of their lives. And that is how they deal with the first Skrulls who invaded Earth.
See, it was totally nonviolent. They didn't die. They get to be happy cows in California. Newsflash. Cows in California are not happy.
Well, they were probably in upstate New York or something like that, because it's the Fantastic Four and everything takes place in New York City. Of course, when the Skrulls learn of this, they are offended beyond words that 3 of their members were turned into mindless animals who were intended to be, I don't think they were intended to be dairy cows or beef cows. They were not intended for consumption at any point, wherever it was that they were dropped off. But it was later retconned that they were put into a meat processing plant. So some people ate Skrull burgers and got some mild shape-shifting abilities from that, but also are infected with basically mad Skrull disease and have a limited lifespan. So that's the origin of another team called the Skrull Kill Crew.
Oh, geez. That's too much for me, but I would like to see a scene with Skrull cows in this show at some point. Then just have like bodyguards, but they're cows, and they just de-cow when someone's like, "I'm gonna pull a gun," and they're like, "We're actually."
Moo, motherfucker.
I must confess, I am not a cow, nor am I left-handed.
All right, we should probably
Back to the grinder.
back to the grinder, which is basically what Sonya is doing to Brogan when Gravik and his team show up.
Yeah, dude gets ignited on the inside and spills some beans.
Yes. And the fight scene when Gravik and Gaia and the rest, or not Gaia, she's not part of that because she goes around back and
Right, she's watching the car.
well, she's watching the car, but then she goes around back and I'm pretty sure she's the one who calls the cops on their safe house.
Right. Kind of cold-blooded how Sonya just set up all those guards to just stand outside and get slaughtered because she knew they were coming. She's like, where's the escape room? Just in case.
Just a hunch. Yeah, Sonya has to use that escape hatch while the Russian guards out front get into what I referred to in my notes as a very Bourne Identity-esque fight. The way it's shot with all of these close-ups and all of these fast moves and everything reminded me of that style of fight choreography.
Much agreed. Very well done.
Yeah, but yeah, Sonya takes off. Gravik asks Brogan, what did you tell them? And Brogan lies by saying he only told them lies.
Yep.
But apparently, like you said, Gravik can tell when a Skrull is lying, so they take him out into the woods and no more Brogan. And in the meantime, we see Fury one last time in this episode, where he pulls another vehicle out of storage. He apparently has these little drop sites everywhere that he can just...
Give a man 30 years unfettered access to a dark budget and see what happens.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to need a car here, a car here, a car here, and just an agent to come by once a month and start the car up and making sure it's still running.
Right. He lives in his own personal GTA. There's always a vehicle when he needs it. There's always a med pack when he needs it.
Yeah.
There's always a secret underground hospital where he can play dead when he needs it.
And apparently there's a very nice house when he wants it, where there is a Skrull living.
Yeah.
Like I said at the very beginning of the episode, I think that is Vara. I think that is the same Skrull who first introduced Gravik and Fury to one another.
It is. And he pulls a Barton. He's got a whole secret family thing going on.
Yeah, well, this explains why he was so sympathetic to Barton's needs.
That's a good retcon right there.
He also has a secret wife that no one has ever been told about.
Well, it's hand wavy to be like, yeah, of course, it's Nick Fury. He's going to keep secrets. It's like, dude knew there were aliens on the planet 13 years before there was a man in titanium who became the first Avenger.
No. Take that back. The first Avenger is specifically Captain America. That's the name of his first movie.
Yeah, but he didn't join the Avengers until the Avengers. First person approached about the Avenger initiative, as far as we know, was Tony Stark.
That's
Avenger
true.
was Carol's call sign, so we could call her an official Avenger. But yeah, Cap gets the title.
So, how long do you think Fury has been married?
Well, he knew her 29 years before, minimum.
Yeah.
And he was apparently on solid terms with her, so probably knew her for
He was
30
on
years.
forehead bumps.
Yeah. So,
Terms with her.
Sometime in the last 30 years, he decided to marry an alien. I'm kind of okay with this. It's not too much of a stretch to be like, yeah, okay, Nick Fury, the man whose secrets have secrets, has a secret family in Britain somewhere. That's fine.
Oh, yeah, I totally buy it. It was just a very surprising moment. That was quite the twist to end the episode on. Is, hey, by the way, Fury's been married to a Skrull for years, possibly decades.
The whole time.
And we end the episode with a wonderful song, a nice needle drop here of Try a Little Tenderness by Otis Redding.
I really liked this episode. I thought the emotional cues hit perfectly. The action shots were not, I wasn't begging for more from the action. It was just enough. Amelia Clark gets a little underutilized in this episode. She's more background side character. We get the feature on Gravik finally, but I'm definitely suspecting she's gonna come back into the ring. Obviously, it's Amelia Clark.
Yeah, exactly. I would say she's probably going to be a major player in the next episode.
I would say that she has the power to decide the fate of not just Fury, Talos, and Gravik, but expanding that out. Like, it's not beyond me to think that she could become an Avenger.
She could become an Avenger, or she could become the next Empress. She could be the successor to the Skrull leaders.
You know, they might be the first alien species hiding on Earth, but they're not the only alien species hanging out on Earth. There's a whole contingent of Asgardians living in Norway, and they seem to be doing just fine.
True.
But that's probably because they could just annihilate any human aggression and just show up. Look, we're going to get you drunk, and if you don't leave after that, we're probably going to kill you.
Well, and also they set themselves up as a tourist attraction.
That's true.
They are very friendly to outsiders coming to visit, even if they name their ice cream shop up after a mass murdering tyrant.
Yeah, I got to work on that branding. Infinity cones is not the best thing.
No.
What was your take? Your takeaway from this?
Oh, it was such a great episode. Again, it asks so many questions that I want to know the answers to. I'm still optimistic that we're going to get the answers to the great majority of those questions before this ends, or possibly they'll lead into future projects like the Marvels and Armor Wars, and we'll get those answers then.
I mean, I'm still convinced, just based on the date ranges for this episode, this season leading to the release of the Marvels, that there's going to be a free flow tie-in somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But I am very excited and eager to see what next week brings, and how it might pull me out of my corner of Fury's 10 steps ahead. He's already got this thing solved. He's just playing his role.
Yeah. There is a part of me that says, yes, that would be very fun for him to say, oh, yeah, no, I've had this in the bag the entire time. But I don't think it would be as dramatically satisfying as Nick coming out of a funk and getting back to who he was.
Absolutely fair. And I would not be disappointed if that were the case. Maybe I'm leaning into the disappointing ending so that when the good ending happens, I'm not disappointed.
Or if the disappointing ending happens, you're just neutral.
I think it was Maya Angelou that said it best: expect the worst and hope for the best, and be surprised by nothing in between.
Nice. Well, once again, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Dag, for joining me.
My pleasure.
And yes, we will find out what happens next week in the ongoing secret invasion. We'll be back next week to discuss the next episode, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the show as well. You can send those, questions for future scripted episodes, or just comments on the show in general by sending an email to welcome2geektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, welcome2, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you'd prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcome-to-geektown, Twitter @geektownpodcast, or Mastodon @welcome-to-geektown @mastodon.social. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, why not become a patron at patreon.com/welcome-to-geektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, audio outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show so we can all tell them,
Welcome to Geektown. Population, us.
Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All of their sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.